having Citizen Sleeper 1 and 2 design works come together as one package and be, one big archive of all the work done is really satisfying, but it's also a really emotional part of the development in a way. And looking back on what's been 5 years of just unbelievable response to the game, of a process that I think has just been so beautiful to work with Guillaume and Amos, and has produced such nice work. It's really special to look through those books and to think about every little decision and little moment and the way in which we kind of followed our instincts and tried to build something special. Citizen Sleeper 2 design works pulls together the huge volume of work that went into the development of Citizen Sleeper 2. That means Guillaume's sketches and artworks, all of the character designs, along with loads of notes about our weird process of how we actually design Citizen Sleeper characters, which often involves me sending random pictures of fashion and Hollywood film stars and weird bits of text, and somehow Guillaume producing absolute masterpieces out of them. It also includes lots of shots and information about all the locations in the game, because one of the massive things with Citizen Sleeper 2 was actually expanding the world out from one location into 10 separate locations, plus a ship, plus contract locations. So the game was so broad. And so I guess the book itself will capture that kind of extra broad quality, that kind of widescreen view that Citizen Sleeper 2 has of the universe, and just kind of extending out. The fashion became broader, it became from more locations, the characters, where they come from, their histories became broader, the locations you can visit, the experiences you can have. So all of that, we're trying to pack that into the book and make sure it represents that that extra kind of travelogue type experience that you get in Citizen Sleeper 2. I think what we're able to reveal in a Design Works book for Citizen Sleeper 2 is really just the level of thought that goes into every part of a game like this, especially with such a small team, when it's literally just me, Guillaume, and Amos in the core team. Each of us is putting a huge amount of thought, and there are lots of tiny discussions about every single individual decision that we make creatively in the game that I think maybe people don't necessarily realize, that with a small team there's an incredible intimacy to making a game like that. And I think the Design Works books allow me to remember, even, especially because I'm making so much stuff myself, to remember even why I made certain decisions. It's only in interviews and discussions and digging through my notes that I suddenly remember, oh, that's what this character's based on. Oh, I wanted these two things to connect. And the game's absolutely huge. It's 250,000 words, and so you'd forgive me for forgetting some of that as I wrote it. But actually, I love the process of going through and making these books and talking to John, who's writing the book, and kind of really being able to draw out all of that detail and information from the process. I think the early sketch that really captures Citizen Sleeper 2 for me is the painting I did of the rig, which is your home throughout the game. I think for me, I don't do a huge amount of kind of painting or concept art for Citizen Sleeper generally, because I do the 3D modeling myself, so there's not really much point in me doing a beautiful painting to then show to myself and then, I can see that that's what I'm going to model. So a lot of it happens inside my mind. But for the rig, it felt really, really important right at the start of the project to define what is this home spaceship. And for me, the kind of home spaceship is a classic science fiction element. And so I really wanted to work on the exact design and the shape and the iconography, how the paint and the metal and the cockpit would all fit together, and find a unique shape that captured the kind of balance of maybe industrial functionality with something just a little bit aftermarket, something that's been painted over, repaired, redone. So that painting actually represents a huge amount of thought and effort, and a really kind of defining piece of art, I guess, for me, in terms of setting my expectations and ideas for the sequel. So I think My design process is a thing that often occurs inside my own mind because, you know, I'm a mostly solo developer. I have Guillaume doing the art and I have Amos on the music, but almost everything else and most of the work done in Unity is done by me. It means that actually the design process is not documented in the way that a traditional game might be, where you expect there's tons of concept art, there's tons of design notes, there's maps people have drawn, because there's not that need to communicate between multiple people. So actually, books like this become really important, both for me, I think, and also for kind of archiving the game to some extent, because in the discussions I have with the writer of the books, often things are pulled out and exposed that I didn't know were there. And so I think that becomes a really important part of my process and allows me to also do a kind of post-mortem to some extent and remember why it is that I did certain things. So I really love physical records of almost anything. You'll probably be able to tell from the studio behind me, but I kind of place physical objects or printouts of art, postcards, prints, books around me as I work. Because of working mostly alone, I have to work within a context, and so I define that context often through physical artifacts. And so for me, translating Citizen Sleeper into a physical artifact is a really nice part of that process, where I can go from taking influence from other physical artifacts and having that feed into the game, and then the game itself coming out and becoming a new physical artifact that might have that influence on other people. So that's a really key part of it. And because it's a game where you have things like dice, and you know, the graphic design is so important to me and such a big part of my process, that having that actually being on physical objects I guess I will always feel, because of my background working outside of games, that's the culmination of design, is when it's in the world and people can touch it and feel it. Spindlejack is a really fun project for me because it's a project that I never thought I'd get to make. Games take a few years to make, and I can only make certain games, but I have a lot of ideas for games. And at one point, I was doing huge amounts of research because I'm obsessed with bike couriers, especially bike couriers in the 90s. It had all these kind of incredible fashion and stories about them. And Cadet was kind of, in the game, my tribute to that interest of mine. But while I was working on Cadet as a character, I developed the idea of a kind of bike courier video game. And I kept playing about with it, but I knew that I would never really get to make a video game out of this. It's not something that I'd spend 3 years making. It doesn't fit within the kind of games I make. And then when it was coming up to the anniversary of Citizen Sleeper 1, and we were wanting to do this Citizen Sleeper Day, I suddenly had the idea that it could actually be a tabletop game. And I started to prototype it literally on a flight to somewhere. And by the end of the flight, I got off the plane and I knew that exactly what this game would be and how it would structure, because I had all the ideas that I'd had from my video game idea. And so I was like, oh, I can make this a pen and paper game. And that's kind of how Spindlejack was born. And it was made, in just a couple of weeks in the lead up to Citizen Sleeper Day last year. And since then, I've been wanting to build on it and have the opportunity to take it somewhere, because I'm happy with the design, but it felt like it could really be tuned up, and all of these, again, ideas I had for the video game version, I felt like, oh, I could actually bring more of these into the tabletop version. So for Design Works, we also have a new physical edition of Spindlejack that builds on the free game and adds these new modules to it. One of them is actually a kind of story mode for it that tells Cadet's story before the game, because she's such an important character to me in the game. So I love this idea of players getting to play as her and taking her journey from a kind of lowly courier to being a kind of legendary courier within the Fast Spindle where she works. So yeah, it's a project that I'm just so excited to expand out and find new places, and it's part of, I guess, an experiment in expanding Citizen Sleeper more generally to tell stories about characters who aren't sleepers. It'll be the first time we've ever made something where there isn't a sleeper at the heart of the story, unless you decide that your courier is a sleeper when you're playing it. But it can be just about people in this world, and I think that's a big step for the kind of Citizen Sleeper universe, is seeing it from other perspectives, and that's something I want to continue.